What if the only way to save your dying mother was to accept a lie that could ruin your life? I didn't know the woman who offered to save us. I only knew her name, her designer heels, and the cold confidence in her eyes when she said, "Let me pretend to be your daughter." I was on hour 14 of my third shift that week, trying to keep my eyes open between hospital rounds, when the cardiologist called me into the ICU. My mother's chart was glowing red in the system, blinking like a silent alarm. "Rebecca," Dr. Harris said gently, "your mother's condition has deteriorated. She needs a complex valve replacement surgery. It's expensive and time-sensitive." Without it, he didn't finish the sentence. I nodded. I already knew. I'd seen the scans. But no one tells you how helpless you feel when you're a nurse who can't even afford to save her own family. I had already applied for 3 different loans. Denied. My credit was mediocre at best, and my salary, laughable in the face of 6 figures. I sat by my mother's hospital bed that night, her skin pale, her chest rising shallowly beneath the thin blanket. She didn't know I had exhausted every option. That I had run out of time. Until she whispered, "Don't give up yet." The next morning, a new patient was admitted to the VIP suite on the 12th floor. A woman in her mid-50s, elegant, poised, too mysterious to be casual. Her chart listed her as Teresa White, but no next of kin. Her vitals were normal, her condition vague, and her questions, pointed. "You're Rebecca North?" she asked without looking up from her phone. "Yes, I'm one of the nurses assigned." "I know who you are," she cut me off. "I also know you've been trying to get a loan approved for the past 3 days. For your mother." My stomach turned to ice. "How do you?" "Does it matter?" she said, finally locking eyes with me. "I can get you the loan. But I'll need you to trust me, and lie." Teresa explained that she knew someone at Kingston Elite Bank. A manager. If she came in with me as my estranged daughter, pretending to co-sign on the loan, the bank wouldn't check deeper. They wouldn't question the irregularities. Her status, her connections, her money, none of it was real, but the illusion was convincing enough. And I was desperate enough. The next day, we walked into Kingston Elite together. She held my hand. Her lipstick was perfect. Her fake sobs were Oscar-worthy. She called me sweetheart and told the loan officer she regretted leaving me as a child but would do anything now to help. 2 hours later, the money was in my account. The surgery happened within the week. My mother made it. And for a moment, I believed I had just made the deal of a lifetime. But then Teresa vanished. And I learned she was not who she claimed to be. She was an actor. A stand-in. A pawn in something much darker. I found out the truth from a cough. 3 weeks after the surgery, my mom was healing slowly, and I was finally breathing again. I hadn't heard from Teresa since the day of the loan. No phone call, no message, not even a trace of her signature on any formal document, just her fake name and a borrowed identity. It bothered me, but I didn't question it. I was too relieved. Until I overheard 2 orderlies in the staff lounge talking about a movie premiere. "And you know that guy? The one playing the CEO? I swear I've seen his double here before. Doubles are everywhere. You think rich folks come to this dump themselves?" I froze. Doubles? I went back through our system and searched for Teresa White. Nothing substantial. No insurance. No follow-up visit. Just a one-time VIP stay with no medical necessity and a high-profile clearance. That night, I started digging. And I found her. Her real name was Sylvia Dunn. She wasn't a philanthropist or a financier. She was a professional impersonator, hired by the wealthy to pose as them for all kinds of tasks, signing papers, attending charity dinners, even getting hospital treatments. It was a bizarre, underground gig, completely legal, until it wasn't. And she'd signed my loan with a false identity. At first, I panicked. But nothing happened. Weeks passed. Until the call came. "Miss North, a man's voice asked. Crisp. Too calm. This is Mr. Ellison from Kingston Elite Bank. We need to speak about your recent loan. In person. The branch was intimidating. Glass walls, gold accents, and marble floors that felt colder than the hospital's ICU. Mr. Ellison looked like he belonged on a magazine cover for villains. Thin tie, thinner smile. We have a problem, he said, lacing his fingers together. The woman who signed your loan. We reviewed her documents. She doesn't exist. That means your guarantor isn't valid. That makes your loan fraudulent. My heart dropped. No, I didn't know. She said she knew someone here. She does. Me, he said smoothly. What? She's a contractor. She gets people like you into places you don't belong. And I get something in return. He slid a folder across the desk. Here's the issue, your debt is now unsecured. Normally, we'd report this as fraud. But I'm giving you an option. The folder contained a document transferring the deed of my apartment to the bank. Sign this, he said, and we won't involve the police. I stared at the page, nausea rising. My apartment wasn't much, just 2 rooms near the hospital, but it was my only safe space. My mother lived there with me now. She needed stability. I can't sign this, I whispered. Then expect debt collectors by the end of the week. And he meant it. The next day, a man in a black jacket banged on my door. 2 more waited downstairs, knocking on neighbors' units, asking questions. Threatening letters arrived. My building manager hinted that if I caused too much noise, he'd have to reevaluate my lease. I was drowning. And then came the most unexpected lifeline. A message on my phone, "Hey, it's Mark. Remember me from high school? I heard you're in some trouble. I think I can help. Mark Coleman." I hadn't thought of him in 10 years. Back in high school, he was the quiet kid who always sat 2 rows behind me in chemistry. Polite, bookish, always with ink-stained fingers and a half-eaten granola bar in his hoodie. We never ran in the same circles. I don't even remember saying goodbye after graduation. But somehow, he had remembered me. And now, he was offering help when no one else even knew I was in trouble. We met at a downtown cafe later that night. He looked different, sharper jaw, sleeker haircut, a tailored coat that screamed corporate. But his eyes were the same, soft, earnest, a little nervous. "I work for a bank," he said after we sat down. "Not Kingston, thank God. I saw your name flagged in a risk report that floated across our desk. It didn't make sense. You don't fit the fraud profile." So I asked around. I was too tired to hide my humiliation. "So you know I got scammed?" He shook his head. "No, you got set up." He pulled out a folder from his bag and slid it across the table. "Your loan wasn't flagged for fraud until 2 days after it was approved. And guess who signed off on it?" He tapped the corner of the page. "Mr. Ellison's name. You think he did this on purpose?" I asked, my voice low. "I think it's worse than that," Mark said. "Ellison's part of a ring. They use fake guarantors to push loans through, usually to desperate people. Then they discover the fraud and pressure the borrower into surrendering assets. The bank stays clean. They get your property. Everyone wins, except you." I felt sick. "That's extortion." "It's illegal," Mark corrected, "if we can prove it." And just like that, he became my secret weapon. Over the next week, Mark funneled me classified emails, internal memos, and audio clips, things no outsider should have seen. He even covered my first loan payment himself, buying me time. I cried when I saw the deposit. "You didn't have to do this," I told him. "I did," he replied quietly. "You're not alone in this." It was the first time in weeks I believed it. But Ellison must have sensed something. Because 2 days later, Mark was attacked. They found him unconscious in an alley behind his office building, bruised ribs, a concussion, and a warning note shoved in his coat: "Stay out of things that aren't yours." I visited him in the hospital. His face was swollen, but his spirit wasn't. "They know I'm getting close," he said through a wired jaw. "Which means we're getting close." I gripped his hand, my heart full of guilt and gratitude. "I'm so sorry this happened." "Don't be," he said. "They wanted to scare me. But all they did was piss me off." But we weren't the only ones who were angry. Because Mark wasn't alone when he was attacked. 3 homeless men who lived near the alley saw everything. And they didn't just call an ambulance, they intervened. "They saved my life," Mark said. "And I think one of them recognized Ellison's driver." That tip was all the investigators needed. By the end of the week, the police had opened a formal case. Ellison's office was raided. And the ring began to unravel. The investigation moved fast after that. Mark was still recovering, but he worked with the detectives from his hospital bed, feeding them names, dates, even internal chat logs he'd secretly saved. I testified too, more than once. The hardest part wasn't reliving what happened, it was staying strong while sitting across from Ellison in a deposition room, watching his smug expression slowly unravel. They charged him with fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. But the story didn't end there. Because just as Ellison was being led away in cuffs, someone else came back into my life, unexpectedly, quietly, and permanently. Sylvia Dunn, aka Teresa White. I came home late one night to find her sitting on my doorstep. She looked different. No expensive coat, no flawless hair. Just jeans, sneakers, and a deep sadness etched into her face. "I heard what happened," she said softly. "I wanted to see you. I should have slammed the door. Called the police. Yelled. But I didn't. Because something in her voice didn't sound like a con artist anymore. It sounded like regret. I didn't know they'd come after you like that," she said. "He told me it was just a shortcut. That the loan would be real, that no one would get hurt." I swear, I believed him. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice hoarse. She hesitated. "Because I wanted to tell you the truth." I let her in. Not because I trusted her, but because I needed answers. She sat on my worn couch, eyes flicking around my modest apartment like it was a crime scene. "I wasn't just pretending to be your daughter," she said slowly. I might actually be part of your life. For real." That's when she pulled out an old photo. A creased snapshot of her and my mother, years ago, at a carnival, arms around each other like best friends. "I met your mom when we were teenagers," she said. "We were inseparable for 2 summers. Then I left town, but I never forgot her. And years later, when I found myself in New York, broke, sick, I looked her up. The world tilted. She helped me get a room at the hospital. She didn't tell you about me because, well, she wasn't sure how to. And I didn't expect to see you there, working as a nurse." She looked up at me, her eyes wet now. "But the moment I did, I knew. You're my daughter, Rebecca." I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. It didn't make sense. Not after everything she'd done. But the photo in my hand was real. And when I thought back, her eyes, her mouth, the curve of her cheek, they did look familiar. Like my own reflection. I didn't believe her. Not yet. But I didn't throw her out, either. Over the next few weeks, Sylvia stayed with us, quietly, respectfully. My mother, still recovering, finally confirmed what she had once sworn to take to the grave. "She's your father," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You were conceived the night before she left town. I didn't even know I was pregnant until she was gone. I was too scared to find her again. It was messy. Complicated. But somehow, it made sense. And for the first time in my life, I had answers. But the peace didn't last. Because while my mother and Sylvia started trying to rebuild the past, someone else was watching. Ellison's associates, still loose, still angry. And they were about to strike. The first sign came with silence. Not the quiet kind, the dangerous kind. The phone stopped ringing. The mail stopped arriving. Even my emails slowed to a trickle. It was like my life hit a strange, eerie pause. I thought maybe I was imagining it. Until Mark called. "There's chatter," he said, his voice tight. "Ellison's people, they're still out there. They think you talk too much." "They're right," I replied. "I did. That's why they're watching you." And suddenly, everything made sense. The car I kept seeing parked outside, the strange hang-up calls, the maintenance guy who wasn't really from our building. I wanted to believe it would blow over. But then, Sylvia disappeared. She left one morning to grab groceries and never came back. Her phone went straight to voicemail. My mom, who had just started warming up to her again, was panicking. I was losing my mind. I called hospitals, shelters, friends. Nothing. Then a burner phone buzzed in my mailbox with a single text, "Come to the Riverpoint warehouse. Bring no one. She talks, she dies." My legs gave out. I collapsed on the kitchen floor, shaking, barely able to breathe. I called Mark. He was still on medical leave, but I could hear him sitting up in bed when he realized what was happening. "I'm calling the cops," he said. "No. If they see flashing lights, they'll kill her. Then I'm coming with you. You can't even walk properly, Mark." But he didn't listen. I drove to Riverpoint in the dark, headlights bouncing over potholes and broken fences. It was the kind of place no one asked questions about. No cameras. No witnesses. I parked the car and stepped inside. The warehouse smelled like rust and gasoline. A single light bulb flickered above, casting long shadows. Two men stood near a folding chair where Sylvia was tied up, bruised, bleeding, but alive. "Rebecca North," one of them drawled. "You've been quite a pain in the ass." "You have no idea," I said. Then I saw it, a blinking red light in the corner. A camera. Security footage. They were recording this. Probably to frame me. Or worse. "I don't know what you think you're going to do," I said, edging closer to Sylvia. "But you're making a mistake." The man pulled a gun. "No. You did. When you turned Ellison in." Then came the shouting. And the lights. Floodlights lit up the building, followed by the sound of boots and sirens. Someone had tipped off the police. The two men panicked. One ran, the other tried to drag Sylvia, but it was too late. Officers swarmed the warehouse like a wave. Mark limped in behind them, his face pale but determined. "I knew you'd go anyway," he said to me, breathless. So I called someone else. And that someone was the lawyer Sylvia had contacted weeks ago. He was already filing charges, already reviewing footage. The men had walked into their own trap. Sylvia was freed. The police arrested the men on site. And the footage? It exonerated her and sealed the case against Ellison's entire network. For the first time in months, we could exhale. But life, as always, had one more surprise in store for me. Because 3 weeks later, I passed out at work. And the test results changed everything. I thought it was just exhaustion. After everything, Sylvia's rescue, the arrests, and countless sleepless nights, I assumed my body had finally reached its limit. I collapsed during a routine shift, right in the middle of a patient handoff. One moment I was reciting vitals, the next I was staring at the fluorescent ceiling, my heart pounding like I'd run a marathon. They ran every test. At first, it looked like stress. But then a nurse handed me a folder with trembling hands. "You should sit down for this." I opened the file and saw the results, positive. Pregnant. I reread it 3 times. The room spun slowly, like the moment was trying to be gentle with me. I hadn't planned on this. There was no boyfriend, no romantic subplots, just one vulnerable night with someone I'd been trying not to fall for. Mark. We had never labeled it. After everything we'd been through, it was easy to blur the lines, his touch lingering a second too long, my head resting on his shoulder during late-night strategy sessions. But neither of us had said anything real. There was always a crisis to deal with. And now, this. I told him that evening. He was silent for so long I thought maybe I'd ruined something sacred. Then he took my hand and said quietly, "You've been saving lives your whole life. Maybe it's time you created one." I cried harder than I expected. But the pregnancy wasn't easy. My blood pressure spiked in the 2nd trimester. I had to reduce my hours at the hospital, then take early leave. The stress, the trauma, the late nights, it all caught up with me. I was forced to rest, and I hated it. But Mark didn't flinch. He moved in. He cooked. He cleaned. He built a crib we didn't need yet and read baby name books at night. He became the quiet stability I didn't know I needed. Sylvia and my mother, now reconciled in that strange, cautious way only the past allows, became like sentinels. One would bring soup, the other herbal teas. They laughed together sometimes now. It was weird. Healing. Beautiful. 6 months later, I gave birth to a baby girl. We named her Hope. Because that's what she was. But the biggest surprise came 2 weeks later, when Sylvia showed up at my apartment with paperwork. 2 abandoned twin boys were found near a shelter I used to volunteer at, she said. I couldn't walk away. She and my mother adopted them. At 61 and 59, 2 women who'd once loved and lost each other now became mothers again, together. It was chaos. Bottles and diapers and late-night screaming matches. But it was also home. In one apartment lived a nurse, her daughter, a banker, a reconciled first love, a forgiven mother, and 2 second-chance children. Somehow, through everything, we had become a family. We used to be survivors. Now we were something else. 6 months after Hope was born, I stood on the balcony of our apartment, no longer threatened by banks or chased by shadows, watching the sunrise spill across the skyline. The air was still, save for the occasional giggle drifting through the open window. Hope was in her bassinet, cooing softly. Mark was sleeping on the couch, arm hanging off the side, a burp cloth still over his shoulder. Sylvia and my mom were arguing, lovingly, this time, in the kitchen over how to fold a swaddle. And somewhere down the hall, the twins were awake, babbling to themselves like their giggles held secrets only they understood. The same apartment I once feared losing had now become the safest place I knew. The loan? Paid off. Mark worked a miracle through connections, leveraging every piece of evidence we had to not only wipe the debt clean but to recover part of what Ellison and his associates tried to steal. The bank was forced to issue a quiet settlement. Ellison was sentenced to 5 years. His co-conspirators got less, but they were banned from ever working in finance again. I didn't attend the sentencing. I didn't need to. Some endings don't require witnesses. Instead, I chose to focus on beginnings. I went back to work part-time after 3 months. The hospital welcomed me like I never left. Patients smiled when I walked in. Nurses I'd mentored hugged me tighter. I wasn't just the girl who got caught in a fraud ring. I was the one who fought back, and won. Mark proposed on a quiet Thursday evening with a note tucked inside a board book. It simply read, "You've healed so many people. Will you build a life with me?" I said yes, crying over mashed peas and formula bottles. We married in a small ceremony at the courthouse, nothing fancy. Just us, the baby, the twins in their little tuxes, my mom and Sylvia holding hands, and a few friends who had walked with us through hell. There were no dramatic speeches, no grand toasts. Just quiet love. But the story doesn't end with a wedding. It ends with the ordinary things that feel extraordinary when you've survived something dark. Hope's first laugh. Mark swaying her to sleep at 2 a.m. Sylvia teaching the twins to play chess, insisting that they must learn to outwit life. My mom gardening again, humming a tune I hadn't heard since I was a child. Me waking up not in fear, but in peace. We didn't erase the past. We outgrew it. And somehow, all the pain, all the betrayal, all the near-collapse moments led us here, to a home filled with love, second chances, and echoes of children's laughter in every room. I once thought I made a deal with the devil. But it turns out, I made a deal with fate. And for once, fate was kind.